Okay, we'll start with this one. Michael Benson tweeted, when asked about Canelo Alvarez's next fight in September, Golden Boy's Oscar De La Hoya named 4 potential opponents: Gennady Golovkin 3, Demetrius Andrade, Sergey Kovalev, and Callum Smith. And let's just be honest here. You don't have to be a fan of Canelo Alvarez, you don't have to like the guy, to say that those are 4 very exciting opponent options. That regardless which one of these 4 names Canelo Alvarez decides to go with, so long as it is one of these 4 names, it is an attractive fight and an appealing opponent option. Now, in the case of a Golovkin rubber match, I still think that they would get a warm reception for a fight like that. I think that if Canelo Alvarez decided to give Gennady Golovkin a third opportunity to have a fight, I think that people would still tune in to watch it, but their perceptions of the fight would definitely be different than what they used to be. That's saying that I think a lot of people would show up to see the thing, and I think a lot of viewers at home would watch it, but they wouldn't be as intrigued by it, given the events that took place in the first and second fights. That first fight disenfranchised a lot of boxing fans because there were a lot of boxing fans, myself included, that felt that Golovkin had done enough to win a decision. He didn't win a decision, they scored it a draw. And while the second fight was a much closer fight that could have swung either way, it could have swung Canelo's way, it could have swung Golovkin's way, but, it swung Canelo's way, that regardless of the second fight being close, the fact that the first fight was scored the way that it was scored, it kind of saps some of the excitement that a boxing fan might have, because you get the impression that you gotta beat Canelo Alvarez with a fucking chair to win a decision against this guy, because that fight didn't seem close to a lot of people. Not just me, not just you listening to this video, but there were a lot of people out there that felt Golovkin did more than enough to win a decision, and he didn't. He got a fucking draw.
People didn't like that.
So the proposition of a rubber match comes up in light of the events that took place in the first and second fights, and yes, I think that people would watch it. I also think that there would be a lot of people in attendance, but the excitement, that same excitement to see these 2 guys collide, it's not quite there. It's still a fight that would do considerable business, it's just not the most exciting proposition. From where I'm sitting, to be completely honest, the most exciting proposition, or at least a more exciting proposition, is the proposition that Canelo Alvarez may choose to unify all the belts in the weight class before the year is out. And that would require him to fight Demetrius Andrade, who's one of the other opponent options. A fight with Demetrius Andrade is what you could characterize as a high-risk, low-reward kind of fight. Demetrius Andrade doesn't have the profile of a Gennady Golovkin. He doesn't have the profile that a Callum Smith has in the UK. He doesn't have the profile of a Sergey Kovalev. But he is a world champion. And what's attractive about that fight and appealing about that fight is that is an undisputed middleweight title fight. Essentially, Canelo Alvarez would be finishing the job that Golovkin said he was going to do. Golovkin said he wanted all the belts. Golovkin said he wanted to unify the entire middleweight division. So it would be a novel turn of events to see that it's Canelo Alvarez that intends to finish the job, if he so chose to fight Demetrius Andrade, who's no slouch. He's an undefeated champion. He's a 2-division champion to boot. He was a champion at junior middleweight. He was the WBO champion at junior middleweight. He stands today as the WBO champion at middleweight. This is one of the craftiest, slickest
champions
boxers out there. This guy can box. Understand? So even though he doesn't have a high profile, it's still a very credible opponent for Canelo Alvarez. In that way,
because it's for all the belts,
it's an appealing fight. And Canelo Alvarez himself said that they mean to unify the middleweight division this year. Well, if that's what they intend to do, if that's what they mean to do, then there's only one more piece to the puzzle left to put in place. There's only one belt left to collect, and that is the belt of Demetrius Andrade, who's going to be in action very soon against Maciej Sulecki. Is it possible that after that fight is over, we see Canelo Alvarez and Andrade lock horns for the undisputed middleweight championship? I just don't know how likely it is. I'll say that I would prefer to see Canelo Alvarez unify the middleweight division before he decides to go anywhere else and do anything else in any other weight class. I think that the opportunity is there for Canelo to achieve something that the vast majority of professional boxers don't get to achieve. Do realize, it's one thing to win a world title, and not everybody gets to win a world title, you understand? Not everybody that sets out to become a professional boxer gets to call himself a world champion. It's one thing to win a world title. And to that I'll say that there are lots of world champions out there. There's lots of world champions. There are even less unified champions. And in that way, there are even less undisputed champions. Okay, that's an even shorter list. Those things in mind, if that opportunity is in front of Canelo Alvarez, who's in his prime, okay, he is in top form today.
Get it done.
Those things in mind, I feel like now is the time for just such an exploit, for just such an endeavor, that before you leave the weight class to challenge the likes of a Callum Smith, or you leave the weight class to challenge the likes of a Sergey Kovalev, finish up what you're doing in the middleweight division, because once you do, if you're successful, they're never going to be able to take that away from you, that you were an undisputed champion, that before you went anywhere else to do anything else, you facilitated that portion of your legacy. You know, don't leave it to the annals of history where people are going to be asking, what if, you know, could he have beaten Demetrius Andrade? Why didn't that fight happen? You know, things like that. If it's right in front of you right now and you see that Demetrius Andrade is more than willing, he's got a fight coming up, but it's conceivable he makes it past Maciej Sulecki. You know, if you see that he's willing, then that's the way to go. Finish up what you're doing in the middleweight division, then proceed to do whatever the fuck else you want to do, wherever the fuck else you want to go. I'll say that I would prefer to see the Andrade fight next, in spite of Andrade not having the same profile as a Kovalev or a Callum Smith or even a Gennady Golovkin. But to that I will add that I'm not so sure that that's what Canelo Alvarez is going to decide to do. And the reason I'm not sure is you got to think about it. If the focal point is becoming an undisputed champion, because that's what Canelo Alvarez said, that the accumulation of their efforts this year is to unify all the belts, essentially to do what Gennady Golovkin said he was going to do but didn't. If Canelo's aim is to become an undisputed champion before the year is out, then why are we hearing about a Sergey Kovalev fight? Why are we hearing about a Callum Smith fight? If what you mean to do in what's left of this year is to become an undisputed champion, which a lot of people don't get to call themselves, but if that's what you mean to do, then why are these two other options on the table? You understand? At least the ones that require you to leave the weight class. A rubber match
With Triple G?
I could still see Canelo Alvarez, you know, having a rubber match, then moving on from that rubber match to an Andrade fight. I could see that. But the fact that there are these two other options that would require Canelo Alvarez to either campaign as a full-fledged super middleweight or as a light heavyweight, the fact that those two options are there, it kind of throws things out of the loop. It kind of throws things out of whack. That, hold on, are you trying to be an undisputed champion or are you trying to be a light heavyweight champion? Which one is it, you know? And how much of a priority is it to you to become an undisputed champion in the middleweight division when we're hearing talks and rumors about you going up to super middleweight or light heavyweight? You know, in regards to a fight with Canelo, Callum Smith has already expressed that he's open to it, that he's all for it, which, you know, is conceivable. I mean, of course you are. Who doesn't want a fucking Canelo fight, right? Who doesn't want to fight with Canelo Alvarez? And I'm sure that Sergey Kovalev has something very similar in mind. If the proposition hasn't already been made to him when it is, that I'm sure he'd be open to a fight like that as well. There's no shortage of people that want a Canelo Alvarez fight, but I'm of the opinion that before Canelo Alvarez decides to go up there gambling at super middleweight or light heavyweight to where it might not be in the judges' hands, you know, up there with them bigger guys, you know, maybe you get knocked the fuck out. It could happen. I mean, nobody's invincible. All I'm saying is, before you decide to go somewhere else, to do something else, as close as you are to becoming an undisputed middleweight championship, you know, undisputed middleweight champion, why not finish that up before you decide to go somewhere else? So I'd rather see an Andrade fight. I'd have no complaints if Canelo decided to fight Callum Smith or Sergey Kovalev. I wouldn't complain. Those are credible opponents. Those are even, you know, I mean, seriously, those are ambitious opponent options. I'm just saying that if I had it my way, if it were up to me, I would see Canelo Alvarez finish up what he's doing in the middleweight division so that we can get an undisputed champion and you know, get that catharsis, get that conclusion to this era's middleweight saga before we see the number one guy at middleweight decide to go somewhere else. I'd want to see that fight. Now, for those out there that follow this channel and are interested with how just such a fight would affect the Ring IQ pound for pound list, for those interested in what Canelo Alvarez becoming an undisputed champion would mean for the list, well, that would give him a strong enough argument to unseat Terence Crawford. That's right. Here's the rhyme and the reason behind that. While Canelo Alvarez becoming an undisputed champion won't make him a full-fledged champion in as many weight classes as Terence Crawford, because Terence has been a full-fledged champion in 3 weight classes to Canelo Alvarez's 2. While becoming an undisputed champion in the middleweight division would not match the number of weight classes that Terence Crawford has been a champion in, what it would do is put Canelo Alvarez over the top and cancel out Terence Crawford's undisputed status. You can't use that in the conversation if both Canelo and Terence Crawford have been undisputed champions. So then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look elsewhere to see what has Canelo done that Terence Crawford hasn't done. And what that would show us, if Canelo were successful, if he were to beat Demetrius Andrade and effectively clean out the middleweight division, what that would show us is that Canelo Alvarez has beaten 2 more world champions than Terence Crawford. Understand, Terence Crawford has defeated 4 world champions. Canelo Alvarez has defeated 5 world champions. A 6th really would put him over the top, and it would effectively cancel out Terence Crawford's undisputed status in relation to how it affects the list. That will, yeah, Terence Crawford was undisputed, but so's Canelo Alvarez. And Canelo beat more world champions than Terence Crawford to get there. You understand? That's more or less the kind of a situation. I mean, that really would give him a credible enough argument that he would unseat Terence Crawford. He would be ranked as the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter on the list. Now, I don't think for a second that Canelo Alvarez is sitting somewhere in Mexico worried about where he's ranked on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. This is just for those out there that are wondering, that may be asking themselves, if Canelo were to become undisputed, would that be enough to unseat Terence Crawford? And I dare say yes, because currently, Canelo has beaten more world champions, 1 more world champion than Terence Crawford. The thing is, Terence Crawford's been a champion in more weight classes than Canelo Alvarez. So Canelo beating 2 more world champions than Terence Crawford, 2 more, if he were to beat Demetrius Andrade. Because remember, Canelo beat Austin Trout, Miguel Cotto, Liam Smith, Gennady Golovkin, and now Daniel Jacobs. That's 5. That's 5 to 4. Terence Crawford's 4. If Canelo beats a 6th world champion, well, that's more than enough. That's more than enough to unseat Terence Crawford. It would give Canelo Alvarez a significantly stronger argument
to unseat Terence Crawford.
Now, I'm sure you guys are asking yourselves right now, well, let's say that Canelo Alvarez doesn't shoot for the undisputed championship in his next fight, and he decides to go up there to super middleweight, fight Callum Smith. If he were to beat Callum Smith, would that also be enough for him to unseat Terence Crawford? And that is a little bit more debatable. Here's why. Let's say Canelo does that. He goes up there, beats Callum Smith. He becomes the Ring Magazine and WBA champion in a 3rd weight class. Let's say that happens. That, in and of itself, does not cancel out, does not negate Terence Crawford's undisputed status. That if the conversation comes up, you can always say, look, Terence Crawford cleaned out a weight class, whereas Canelo Alvarez didn't. That's what he's got over him.
No unfinished business.
That, maybe Canelo might have fought more world champions over the same number of weight classes as Terence Crawford, but regardless of that, he never actually cleaned out a weight class that he was campaigning in. It's a close argument, you understand? I mean, at minimum, I could see a credible argument based on an overview of the facts to where maybe beating a Callum Smith would be enough for Canelo to unseat Terence Crawford with full credibility. There's an argument there. But the reason that becoming undisputed at middleweight is a stronger argument is because you no longer have that undisputed status to use against Canelo Alvarez. You can't say that, oh, well, Terence Crawford cleaned out a weight class and Canelo didn't, because, well, now Canelo's cleaned out a weight class too, but he would have also fought more world champions than Terence Crawford. Whereas moving up and fighting a Callum Smith still leaves the door open for you to say, yes, that's a very good win. That's a credible win. And he has become a world champion in the same number of weight classes as Crawford. But the difference is,
still say,
Canelo never cleaned out a weight class, and this guy did. This guy left no stone unturned before he decided to go somewhere else to do something else. That's where the gray area is, you understand? That's where the wiggle room is for the debate. Now, I'll say, if a fight like that would have happened, depending on the performance, does Canelo go in there and dominate the guy? There's still room for him to unseat Terrence Crawford because they would be on equal footing when it comes to the number of weight classes they've been champions in. And that would be 2 weight classes where both of those guys became Ring Magazine champions. Terrence Crawford was the Ring Magazine champion at 135 and 140. Currently, Canelo Alvarez is the Ring Magazine champion at 160, and if he were to, move up there, beat Callum Smith, he would become the Ring Magazine champion at 168. So there's still room. It's debatable. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that in moving up and defeating a Callum Smith, that might just be enough for him to just, unseat Terrence Crawford with that. It's just that the undisputed argument is a little bit more finite because then that, okay, you don't have that to use against Canelo Alvarez anymore because Canelo will be on equal footing with Terrence Crawford's biggest accomplishment, and that's becoming an undisputed champion. So you would then have to look elsewhere for what has Canelo done that Crawford hasn't done. If he becomes undisputed and he's beaten more world champions than Terrence Crawford, yeah, that's enough right then and there for you to say, yeah, he's number 1, man. Now, I know some people like to make the argument that, the weight class that Terrence Crawford cleaned out was a weak, quote-unquote, weak division. And to that, I'll say this. That is an opinion, my friend.
Your opinion.
This list works on outcomes.
Facts.
Facts, stats, results. It doesn't work on opinions. It doesn't rely on your anecdotes or mine or your overview of a weight class. Which weight classes are weak, which ones aren't. That's your opinion. The way you call 140 a weak division, I could turn around and call Liam Smith a weak champion.
Or Austin Trout.
That's one of the champions that Canelo beat, but what's stopping me from calling him a weak champion that didn't do anything? If we're going to run off of opinions, that we can pretty much pick apart and dissect just about anything that anybody ever did. But that's not very objective, is it?
No, it's not.
And it's not a matter of fact that this is weak and this isn't. That's your opinion. That's your perspective. And if I'm not even using my own opinions to rate these fighters, then why the fuck would I use yours?